Hello, and welcome to the Kathleen Spracklin podcast, where I am a woman on a mission to help you get a working Zettelkasten in the fewest number of steps. We are in the Minimalist series, and we are on step 9, almost finished with our Minimalist series. Well, this is an exciting point in this Minimalist series. But before I go into what we're covering in this step, I want to take a moment for us to review how far we've come, because it's really quite amazing when you think about it. We began by assembling our bib box. We saw how to collect sources. We went through books, but the same techniques apply to videos, journal articles, or any other source that you have for your material. We took notes on those sources, and we turned them into main cards. We built a main box with those main cards and some foundation cards to establish some structure and lay out our reading plan so that our Zettelkasten would be ready to capture those thoughts and ideas as they came to us. And we've got a pretty good collection of cards already to get us going. And we indexed all of those cards using a complete tagline so that we could easily get back to the thoughts and ideas and understand without having to run back and grab the cards. We will be able to see what the card was actually talking about. And we have a pretty complete index with just a few cards. So we've learned most of the techniques that we will be using day in and day out to grow the Zettelkasten. Well, as you probably noticed from our foundation cards, 1, 2, 3, and then we had 1A, 1B, 1C, 2A, 2B, 2C, and so on, that the structure seemed to grow outward like a tree. And that's, for the most part, that's true. A Zettelkasten primarily has that structure with a root, and then it goes out into trunks and branches and leaves all the way out to finer and finer structure. Well, there's another cross structure that's possible in a Zettelkasten, and that is where you have a single card that can go in 2 different places in your Zettelkasten, and that card makes a link that joins 2 parts of your Zettelkasten to one another. Those 2 parts could be little pieces up in the corner, or they could be fairly widespread, but it gives a totally different type of a structure to your Zettelkasten that makes it more like a spider web where the knowledge can interact from any direction. It adds a lot of power to your Zettelkasten and a lot of potential insight in your work. So let's see how we handle the situation where one card could potentially have 2 different cards that it wants to join to in your Zettelkasten. I'm all set to go, so come on over to the down-facing camera and I'll show you the example. Okay, for the example, I kind of constructed one. It's a little bit artificial, but I wanted to show you an example of a link, and I didn't actually have one in my small Zettelkasten. But I found an example of an article that was a perfect one to illustrate what's going on here. In my Zettelkasten, one of my main branches, I set the foundation that I wanted to set LiLLiPub on a solid business foundation. And so business is one of the main sections in my coming up reading plan. And this is a pattern language for business. So it seems like it would come under business. But another one of my main areas is I want to know more about how the human mind works. And in particular, one of the areas I'm interested in studying is pattern languages, because they can add clarity and efficiency to communication. So this article seems like it would go under pattern languages. I made a just pretend main card as though it had come out of this article. And so I had a just pretend section of information from the article and a just pretend section of my reaction to it. I used a real live pattern source, the way I would name a source, and then I made a just pretend tagline that brought together business, pattern language, and saves the business day. Okay, so now this is the main card that needs to get filed, that could go either with this card on pattern languages that lend clarity and efficiency to communication, or with this card, I want to set LiLLiPub up on a solid business foundation. Or I could put it with business. But I decided that the two pattern languages might better go together because the pattern language is rather specific. So I decided that it would go with this card. Consequently, just like a regular card, I made a directory card now because this was the second branch coming from this card. And so just like normal, I made a directory card showing that this card on pattern languages now has two different child cards. But I didn't want to lose the fact that this was also another good place for this card. So I wanted to show that this card also relates to this card, and so I needed to add an entry here, but I can't just give it the letter E because it already has a card number. So instead I use this special notation that just means to me to go see this card, its regular card number, and I show that this card could just as easily have been in this group just as much as these other 4 cards. Now that takes me from this card back over to this one, but what about going the other way? This card also needed a directory card to point back to this card, which could have been an alternate parent for it. So now we have a really interesting combination of connections. Okay. Now this card points to this card, and so does this card point to this card. This card points back here, and this one points back here by virtue of this. So now we have a web of intercommunication, and we actually have 3 different conversations that this one card, Business Pattern Languages, participates in. It participates in this conversation, and in this conversation. And now we have the parts interlinking. Now, links don't happen all that often, but they're very important when they do happen because they enable us to actually almost put a card into 2 different places. You don't want to have to actually write the card out twice for it to be in 2 different places. This is the next best thing. The conversations are still present and you can see it in both conversations, and you don't have to choose one very much over the other. Yes, obviously one is going to be where it actually physically goes, but the other will be linked as well, and that connection will not get lost. So play with them, or more likely bookmark this video and be on the lookout for them. And then when you see one where you find yourself saying, where am I going to put this card? It could go here, it could go here, it could go here. Which? You can relax and say, I know about that video. That video shows me how to put it almost like the card is in 2 places at once. It's a little bit of an advanced technique, but you really need to have it in order to have a complete, fully functioning Zettelkasten. And that's what we're going for in the Minimalist series. We're not trying for a toy. We're not trying for a Zettelkasten on training wheels. No, we're looking for a complete, viable, fully functioning Zettelkasten in the fewest number of steps with the fewest number of decisions. So stay tuned and try all of these things out. We have one more lesson to go in a few days, but what I'd like for you to do in the meantime is please post your questions. If there's anything that's puzzling you, actually go and do it. This is not a series to say, I see how that works. I see. Yeah, that's nice. No, the Minimalist series is about doing it. That's why I gave you spaces for your homework. When you do it, then the lessons will really sink in. So try it out. Ask your questions. We'll get your questions answered. And then just stay tuned as we will wrap up the whole series in a few days once the questions settle down. So talk to you later. Bye-bye.